So in part 2 here, we're going to pick up where we left off. We have our halo base built from video 1, and we're going to add some stones around the halo, some claws, and the shank itself. So all the details. Now, of course, there's numerous ways you could add your stones. You can use pave channels, microsets, however you want to do it, depending on how you set up your halo. In this video, we're just going to focus on doing a standard channel with some prongs. But you can definitely feel free to finish this up any way you like. You'll still learn some great new techniques in this video. So the first thing for our channel, for our accent stones, is to extract a curve from the base of the halo to run our path along. So we're going to select the piece, the halo base, and in the curve section, we're going to do an extract UV curve. To extract UV curve, we can select a surface and then place a curve anywhere on that surface. So in the first video, I had you do a single surface when you did the loft. That's the way we can select for our surface, this entire surface around here. It's not cut in half. If you missed that step, you forgot to do that, go back through the history into your halo, the loft part of it, and make sure you check that create a single surface button. So we have our surface selected. In the second tab, we'll create the actual curve. And it's either going to be the U or the V position depending on your surface. In this case, it is the U. And we're going to leave that at halfway. So we'll leave the numbers there and just go ahead and validate. So we have our curve. Now, before we put our channel on this curve, there's one step I want to do, a little extra step that's going to make things easier later. We're going to modify that curve. So select that curve you just extracted. And in the same section, we're going to do modify curves. What we want to do is change the start point. In the reverse direction tab is the change origin option. Go ahead and turn that on. We're not going to change it right now, but we want to have that option in there. So we'll validate that. And we do that because with our channel, we'll want to be able to adjust where the first stone starts from, because depending on how your stones align and how many stones, if you have an odd number, it may not evenly sit on your halo. So by adding that modify curve with the start point changed, we can adjust that later on. So you can delete or hide the extract UV curves. We're done with that. We have our new modified version instead. So delete that. And then we will select the modify curves, go into the jeweler's bench. And if you run your channel, you'll notice that the stones are not sitting properly on that curve anymore. Because we modified it, it's no longer linked to the surface. So that's an easy fix. Double click, close out of your channel, double click back into modify curves. Whenever you modify a curve, you also, if you're putting it on a surface, you want to link it back to that surface. So in the last tab, we can do so right here inside the tool. So we just need to select our support object to link it back. Now when we run the channel, you'll see the stones are properly along the surface. Okay, so let's set up our channel. The first tab, we're dealing with how the stones sit on the path. What we want to change here is the spread strategy to adjustable space. This is going to allow us to fill the entire curve and have the same spacing all the way around the center. The second tab, we can choose the size and number of stones. Here's where I like to freeze the halo base so I can see what's happening inside here. And we set this up for, I believe, 1¼ millimeter stones. So the amount of space you left yourself is going to determine, of course, how big your stones can be. We can always go back in the history and make that larger. The way we built it parametrically, not a problem. But for what we have from the defaults from the first video, we'll use 1.25 millimeter for the initial size. Okay, for the number of stones, we're going to set a obscenely large amount in there. I put 50. And the reason we put more than what'll fit is because later on we may decide to change the size of our stone or the size of our halo. And if we don't put enough stones in there, as it gets bigger, it may have some gaps here because we don't have enough stones. So we're going to purposely make more than enough. It will give you this little warning that all the stones can't be set. That's okay. That just gives us more stones later if we need them. And then finally, your stone position. We're going to leave it for a channel at the stone depth of 0 for the table. If you are going to set these on top of the surface, like with just shared prongs, you might raise those above the surface. And if you're setting it with like a microset, you might want them down below the surface so you can move them below the surface. But for a normal channel like we're doing, let's just leave them right where they're at. Finally, in the third tab, we need to create the actual channel. So we'll turn that on, and that'll give us the cut for the channel. And the first few options here deal with the end of the channel and the shape of the channel. Because we're doing a full channel that matches end to end, that won't matter. So we'll go on down to the cutting depth. It's a percentage here. I like to do it visually, so I just click on my shortcut here for the view, take this bottom red arrow and push the bottom side of your channel about halfway up between the culet and the girdle. So make the channel a little bit more shallow. We're going to cut individual seats in here later anyway. Okay, the next step is, because we're going to do shared prongs inside the channel, we don't need the wall holding the channel or the groove holding the channel, so turn the groove off, and then we'll adjust the width of the channel just a little bit to make room for the prongs. So we'll add a channel offset width. Let's start with 0.1 millimeters. Just wind that up a little bit. That's it, our channel's ready. We validate. Don't forget, when you create a channel, you're going to have two copies of the channel in the tree. One is the channel that has all the settings in it. One is just the cutter element. Hide the variable channel. We're going to use that later to set stones and make adjustments. Okay, so now we can cut the element. We're going to unfreeze the crop and punch by right-clicking and go to Show, and then select the base of the halo and the cutter, and Boolean subtract. If you have your shortcut for Boolean here at the top of the screen, you won't have to switch between benches. So we'll just go right into Boolean and subtract. And our channel's cut. Next, we'll set a stone in there. So we'll just create a stone, leave it centered here. Doesn't matter what size stone you build. It's going to scale appropriately into the channel. So create your stone, choose a color, validate that. And then to set the stone, we select the stone, and then from the tree, we have our hidden variable channel. Select that as well with Control, and then go to Jeweling. Okay, so that's going to automatically set our stones. No changes here, we'll just validate. And then we'll do the same for the prongs. We're going to create a prong. I'm just going to draw a little prong in here, and then we'll adjust the parameters. So I'm going to set it at 0, 0 for the XY center, and then for the Z, we need to bring it below the surface. I'm going to go -1 millimeter. By dropping it below the plane, it's going to bring it down into the channel so our prongs aren't floating. So always an important step with your prongs, bring them below the surface. So 1 millimeter should bring them plenty far enough down. And then we'll set the diameter. I'm going to start with 0.7 millimeters. And then the height, I'm going to start with about 1.5 millimeters. And then I like mine rounded, so we'll change the mode to rounded and validate. Okay, to set these shared prongs, we're going to select the prong and then Control select the channel, again hidden in the tree. And we're going to use channel prongs. Don't use jeweling, use channel prongs. That's going to set them up in between your stones. Okay, so we already see that the prong isn't quite the right size and spacing that we need for this channel, but that's okay. We were just guessing. Go ahead and validate. We'll go back and adjust it. So, so to fix the prong, make it a little smaller and adjust some spacing, we're going to make some changes. Right-click your channel prongs and go down to Created On, and you can select the original prong to make those adjustments. You can also go through the history the old-fashioned way by expanding it here. Okay, so I see that they're too big for these tiny little stones, so I'm going to make the diameter a little smaller, and then I'm going to drop the height just a little bit so it's not sticking up out of the channel. So make those adjustments as needed. That's the beauty of parametric history software like this, is we don't have to pre-plan and measure and make sure everything's going to fit beforehand. We can always go back and make fine-tunements. So when we validate and recompute your history tree here at the top, we'll see, okay, now they're starting to fit a little better. So they're still kind of bumped up against the walls here. I don't have enough space in my channel. I don't want to go any thinner with these prongs. They'll be too small to print. So I'm going to go back into my variable channel, double click, and we'll just add a little more offset width. Let's go up to 0.3 millimeters, widen that up a bit. And now we've got room for those prongs. Now I see here that I widened it quite a bit, so we're cutting a little too much into our base here. We're getting a really thin wall. So if we want to widen up our channel, back when we created the channel, we kept our loft curves here hidden, and we did label them. The outside top would be the portion that I want to adjust. So I'm going to double click into outside top and just scale that out just a little bit more, give myself a little more room for that surface, and just recompute the channel and the cuts. So we just widen this area. Now we've got plenty of room and our walls are thick enough. So again, beauty of parametrics. All that pre-planning we did makes changes much easier. Everything's linked together beautifully. Okay, so we can Boolean our prongs into the halo base. And now we'll talk about that start point. So we'll see here, if I look at the top, my stones aren't even here. And again, it depends on the size of our channel, how much space we give, but that's why we added that modify curve in there. So we can go back and adjust the start point, turn these stones around the center. So I'm actually going to rename this for later as well. So I remember this is to adjust start of channel. So just so I remember, if I want to make adjustments to that start point, that's the setting I need to go into. So I'm going to double click that, go back to the reverse tab, and we'll just change this starting location. So I think I just need to nudge it a little bit. This one doesn't have a live recalculate, so we'll have to validate and recalculate. And we're just kind of eyeballing and guessing here. So we see I have an odd number, so I want to get this just kind of even from this side to that side. We can always go in and adjust our spacing back in the channel if you wanted to make that an even number. All these settings you can go back and tweak if needed. Okay. So our accent stones, our channel stones are all set. The next step is to add our claws for our center stone so we can attach that to our halo. So we're going to also, in the jeweler's bench here, going to go to claws. We don't need belts because we set this up so that the halo is holding the stone in. So we just need the claws. So select the stone, go to claws, and we'll start building the claws. So the first tab, we've anchored them to the stone. That's already done. We'll go to the second tab. We'll click our little shortcut for the view so we can see what we're doing. And we'll go through the tabs. So for the section, we're going to set how thick we want these to be. I'm going to do 0.7 for mine, and we'll round the top. Then we'll go to the height tab and adjust our height. Those are a little tall for this stone. Bring that down a bit, and then just make sure the bottom is down into the halo a bit so we have that good connection again. Next, we'll do our offsets. Here's where we're going to change to easy curved, so I can bend these and curve them up underneath the stone. So I'm going to click my little shortcut again. I got turned around. Let's click that a few times to get it back to the front side. One more. Oh, we're all upside down. Let's go home. Click that one time. Well, it's upside down. That's okay. There we go. Somewhere I got turned over. That's fine. We're just going to adjust our offsets here. So I can bring out the top so it just overlaps the stone a bit, and then we can bring in the bottom two to kind of curve it up underneath so that it's in our halo. I'll just flip this over manually so you can see a little clearer. Bring that in just a little bit more. There we go. Looks good. Now if you want more than 4 prongs, the trick here is to add more claws right here within the same tool. So I'm going to go into position, and then we've got our first set of claws set up. So I'm just going to hit the plus to add more claws to the list. When you do that, anytime you have a list like this, it's going to copy the first set into a new set. And then we can make changes individually between those. So I'm going to grab this little red dot here and move them over. I'm going to do like a double prong setting for my claws. And again, we can go back to the first set and adjust those as needed as well. So maybe I'll spread those out a little bit so that they're even in the corners. So the key, like I said, when you have a list like this, is you can add more to the list. It's just going to copy the first one that was selected when you hit the plus. Go ahead and validate that. And again, we'll go ahead and Boolean it all together. Just a simple Boolean add. Okay. Oh, looks like my claws broke here. So definitely good to look for that. See how my surfaces are a little black here. I think I have them bumped up just to the edge to edge enough where it broke the surface between them. So I'm just going to go back in my history here, right click that, created on, go to the claws. I need to spread these out just a little bit more. Yeah, I got them right up edge to edge here. I think that, grab that sucker. All right, spread those out and recalculate. There we go. Okay, so look for those, surfaces that are touching edge to edge like that. That'll cause some Boolean issues. And we should be good to go. Now we just need to do the shank. So there's a million shanks, the ways you can create shanks. You've learned shanks in some of the other tools or the other videos using different sweeps and methods. I'm just going to do a very simple sweep for this video so I can show you how to remove part of the shank underneath the halo. So build the shank however you want. The second part of this method will be the same. So I'm going to select my ring size builder from the jeweler's bench again. We're going to go right into sweeping wizard. So we can do a simple single rail sweep. Go to the second tab and add a section. And then use the library to pull my section out of the library. I'm going to go in 2D symbols, shanks, and I'm going to use half round number 2. Okay, I'm going to go right into scale to scale this to the size I want. I'm going to make this about 2.5 millimeters wide and 1.75 for the height. It's up to you how thick you want the shank to be. And then just go ahead and validate. Very simple sweep for this one. Okay, so that gives us our ring, but again, we've got this extra metal here underneath the halo. So here's how we can remove that. So I'm going to go highlight this here. We're going to go all the way back through the history of our halo. Got a lot of Booleans, the crop and punch. There's our fillet. So here's our loft. That's the original shape that we want to cut out of our shank. So select the loft, just make sure it's highlighted. Go back to the solid module, and we're going to clone it. In the duplicate section, click on clone and validate. So now we've got this whole copy of our original piece here that doesn't have all the cuts and extra pieces and things cut out of it. We're going to use that to Boolean subtract the halo shape from our shank. So we have Boolean subtract. Okay, now it looks like nothing happened here. If I hide my halo for a second, you see that it cut that shape, but it's still leaving this empty space here where there wasn't anything to cut from the loft shape. Not a problem. If we try to ungroup it, you'll see there's nothing to ungroup because technically this is still one object. It's just an object that happens to have two elements to it, two pieces. So right next to the ungroup is this extract elements tool. So highlight the ring and click on that. You won't see anything visually happen here. Just go ahead and validate. And now when I hover, you'll see that it is now a group of two objects. So extract elements will take a single object that has multiple elements to it, turn it into a group. Now that it's a group, we can ungroup or just jump right into filter and filter out that extra piece we no longer need. So highlight it red and validate. And now it's gone. Okay, so back in our tree, we can show our Boolean number 3 here, the halo. And we are all finished. You can, of course, Boolean these two parts together or print them separately. Up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and we'll test out some of our parametrics. So let's start with our ring size. We built everything to this ring size builder, so let's go right in there, and we'll go from a 7 to a 10, validate, and recompute. Okay, give this a little time. There's a lot of steps we've linked together in there. It's got a lot of Booleans, a lot of the loft to rebuild, but after a few seconds we should see now we've got a size 10 of the exact same halo ring. Perfect, everything's working fine. Let's try that with our stone as well. Let's say we want to change this to an oval shape instead of the round stone. So double click back in your main stone. Remember the rule of number of sides. Brilliant can change to an oval or a cushion. Marquise can change to a heart shape, because those both have 2 curves. So refer back to that chart. Try not to go from like a brilliant to a emerald. That won't work. It has different number of curves. So I'm going to go to an oval from here, and we'll size it to whatever new size of stone we want, and just validate. And then we just have to recalculate to rebuild our ring. Perfect. It all updated. We gave it plenty of stones, so the number of stones changed. Again, we may have to go in and make some fine-tune adjustments. You know, now that we've got an oval shape, some things may not match up quite as well. So like I see here, our width of our surface here is a little too thin now. We're getting thin in the channel area. So just like we did before, we've got all that in the tree here. I'm going to go back to the outside top. Now that we're using this shape, we might need to bring out the outside top a little bit for more surface area. And again, just recalculate. Perfect. So everything in here that we've set up, we've got labeled. You can change if we want to change the size of our accent stones, the colors, any of our loft shapes that we want to adjust, and the ring size. All of that can be adjusted. And then don't forget our new control that we have now for the start of the channel in case our stones aren't even from top to bottom. Looks like I got lucky here. It happens to be perfectly lined up. So if I need to adjust it, no problem. Double click, make that adjustment. So there we go. Now we have our finished ring with the halo with tons of parametric history built in, so you can save this off, save it in the library with history if you like. Next time you need a halo ring, you've got your own customized halo builder. You don't have to build it from scratch every time. We'll see you next time in the Members Care videos.